So, you've got an idea for a business, the store of your dreams. There's just one thing to figure out: everything. That's why Shopify's all-in-one commerce platform makes it easy to sell online, in person, and everywhere else. Sell on social media, source products with an app to get that first sale feeling. It's the only solution that gives you everything you need to sell everywhere you want. So when you're ready to bring your idea to life, power it up with Shopify.
Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/listen.
Percolate on a particular mix of odd and inspiring news headlines in Wendy's Coffee House. Newsmakers with a penchant for the unknown, unexplained, and unusual share their experiences with UFOs, ghost encounters, near-death experiences, and more for your own unique blend of Wendy's Coffee House Curious. And now, here's Wendy.
It's Wendy's Coffee House. My guest, Terry Lovelace. Incident at Devil's Den. Story that, from what I've read, he never, ever intended to tell. You don't talk about funky stuff that makes other people uncomfortable. Especially when, you're in an audience that is really having a hard time dealing with things like UFOs. Then we get into alien implants, and that just takes us on to a whole new level. So with this, we're also in the middle of a shelter in place for coronavirus. Of all the odd, amazing, interesting, unusual, unanticipated crises that we could bring to this equation is the shelter in place. And Terry Lovelace, you're on the line. I really appreciate you being able to talk about this. I know you were going to make an appearance at the UFO conference in Arkansas, and that has been delayed. We'll see how that works out. But, congratulations. I'm glad you decided to just go ahead and come forth with a story. This is absolutely fantastic, and I don't know how you were able to deal with it for 20, 40 years, since 1977, and not ever. Yeah. I mean, that's it. What's it like now in the middle of this corona shelter at home? You weren't going to be able to go to the event anyway.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me, Wendy. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your awesome audience.
Thank you.
Yeah, my wife and I have been sheltering in place. We've been isolated for 2 weeks now. I take this very seriously. I worked in healthcare law for quite a while and was general counsel for LBJ Tropical Medical Center, which is the American Samoa's only source of medical care, and helped to write an infectious disease protocol for the hospital. So I did a little bit of research to do that, and I got myself educated on the 1918 flu epidemic and realized that, it killed more people by far than all the combatants, military and civilian casualties of World War I. Yeah, it's nothing to mess with. It's potentially a very, very lethal disease.
Okay, so that's what I think, in our society now, those of us who don't remember that, and we don't have relatives who have survived that, it's on the far, it's like fiction. And so when I'm hearing people say, well, I'm going to stop at so-and-so and get a coffee or meet so-and-so out and, we're going to dinner, I'm like, I think, well, how does this make sense when I'm thinking about going to work, and our only employees now who can go or are supposed to go into the building are the air staff and production people to help minimize the contact. And I was thinking, well, I put my gloves on and I'm okay going in and out of the building possibly. And then when I come back to the car, I take my gloves off, but my gloves have already touched the steering wheel, which then automatically puts me at risk.
Right. Well, in medical terms, there's a thing called an R, like the alphabetical R.
Yeah.
R naught, like the British word for zero or Z. R naught factor, and the R naught factor is how many people will each person infect if they go about in the public. And this has an incredibly high R naught factor, which is why it spreads so fast. And it seems to be maybe a different strain in Italy and maybe a different strain than we have here. You figure that each person that goes out in public will probably infect 4 people, and then those 4 people will infect 4 people, and then it grows exponentially.
Yeah.
Which is why when you look at the graphs, there's an x-axis and a y-axis going up, and you see this line that goes across, kind of stable, and then you see the spike. And when you see it, it looks like a hockey stick, and it's like case, cluster, boom. I can't take credit for that. Someone else should use that.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is. It expands exponentially. So
it's real.
It's very real.
Yeah.
And we don't know how long for sure that the virus can stay active on a piece of glass or a piece of paper.
Right.
I know that China recalled all of its paper currency, every single note, every single one, and burned them and replaced their currency.
Wow. Because of that unknown. The irony of this is that what's going on right now seems very unreal, but it's real. And your experience in Devil's Den 1977 was also unreal, maybe surreal. And you even have a souvenir to prove it was real. Can you fill us in? What happened?
My friend, I refer to as Tobias in the book, Toby and I were best of friends. We worked the night shift. We were both trained as medics and EMTs, and we drove an ambulance. So we worked in the emergency room at night. I liked it because I was taking night classes and I could do my homework, and there were few officers around. We were both enlisted guys living in NCO housing on the base, and he was just absolutely fascinated with the night sky. He lived to watch the night sky. He knew all the constellations. He knew, satellites when they would come over. He just had this incredible interest in the night sky. So, we made a good combination. We became good friends. And one night he came to me and he said, "Hey, man, I got an idea. Let's go camping." And I'm like, "Toby, are you nuts, man? What do we know about camping?" And I came from St. City. He was from Flint, Michigan. And he says, "Hey, look, it ain't rocket science. We buy a small tent. We buy a couple of blow-up air mattresses. We swipe a few blankets from the hospital here, and we go down and camp. And if we like it, maybe make a regular thing." So we did, despite the fact that it was a long drive. It was over a 6-hour drive from the base. And we drove down there in June of 1977. And I'll cut to the important part. We set up a camp right on the edge of the wood line. We dodged the campgrounds. We didn't want to stay in the campgrounds because of the light pollution interfering with his star watching. Mm-hmm. And, you're not going to take a picture. I wanted to photograph wildlife. That was my thing. So we came to a fence that was chained off, said no admittance. But I thought, we've got to find another way. My friend says, no, wait a minute. He hops out of the car and finds that the chain had just been looped on itself and locked into a noose and just draped over that post. So he picked that up and dropped it to the ground.
Okay.
And,
okay, Terry. This is like the red flag. This is the red flag.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Don't go there. Don't go there. I'm okay. This is the horror film where you get the first chill going. Did you have any feeling about this at this point?
We did. We were elated. We felt like Lewis and Clark. We felt like some kind of not a bit of fear. We felt like we were real outdoorsmen.
Yeah. Okay.
So, when you're 22,
Yeah, I know. I've been there.
So we went in, and in retrospect, it was a little bit weird in that Toby almost had this unerring sense of direction, and he's like, we saw a piece of high ground, and that piece of high ground is still there. I found it on Google Earth. And when you look at it from above, it's a triangular shaped field.
Ah, wow.
And it's still clear cut. There's not a tree growing on it. It's just grass. Still to this day.
Okay.
And it's a high point. You could see for miles. And we got up there, set up camp next to the tree line, built a fire, did all the fun stuff that you do when you're camping. Mm-hmm. And, late in the evening, we're kicked back on these air mattresses. We got a little bonfire between us. And, this sounds so cliche because it sounds like it's right out of a horror movie. But I swear to God that it's true. And that is that all the crickets, the tree frogs, all the noises of the forest stopped.
Yeah.
And it got really, really quiet. And because we were having trouble even making conversation just a few minutes earlier because these things were so loud.
Right. Right.
And I asked my friend, and then, man, is this normal? Like he would know, And yeah, he said, yeah, we've been laughing and cutting up. They'll be back. The tree frogs, all that stuff, they'll come back.
Oh.
But I got to tell you, it unnerved me.
Yeah.
And had I been there by myself, I'd have been in the car and gone.
And no, he didn't leave. What happens next? Terry Lovelace, Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. KCMO Talk Radio, my guest, Terry Lovelace, incident at Devil's Den. So he didn't leave. He's still there. The crickets are quiet, and the other shoe's going to drop.
About this time, he turned his head to the left, and he asked me, he said, hey, Terry, were those lights there before? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I couldn't see him because he was in the way. And I bent back, and over his shoulder, I could see there was this cluster of a perfect triangle of three bright stars, each one about as bright as a North Star.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't look like they belonged there, if that makes sense. They were too far off the horizon to have been like lights from a train or a parking lot or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they seemed to be static, so we watched them, and they didn't move, so we didn't think they were an aircraft. And while we're watching them, they rotated. They turned like they were on an axis.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went straight up in the air.
Oh.
And we could see there were like just a trillion stars out that night. The sky was just a beautiful blue. And we could see inside this triangle of stars, it was jet black, where the surrounding area was blue.
Mm-hmm.
And we watched this thing as it climbed into the air, and it's this tumbling thing where it went end over end. And I felt a sense of calm wash over me, almost like mild sedation.
Yeah.
And then I felt inappropriately disinterested. I mean, it wasn't apathy, but it was darn close.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like I was an observer than a participant in this thing.
Kind of detached.
And we watched this thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we should have been freaked out and running to the car, but we weren't. We were just kicked back, and we watched this thing, and it climbed, and it got to like a ceiling, a high point, and then you could see it start to descend. And as it descended, it got bigger. But the 3 points always remained equidistant to one another. It was obviously, one object, not three things, acting in unison.
Yeah.
And we could see a shadow because the starlight was so bright. We could see a dark shadow on the forest floor below us. And it moved and stopped directly over this little meadow and stopped at about 3,000 feet. And we both sat there and just watched this thing. And from the underneath in the center, there came a light, and it was like a visible beam of white light. It had that quality like a searchlight cutting through heavy fog,
Mm-hmm.
but there was no fog. You could just see the light. And it was about 6 inches in diameter, and it hit our campfire and stayed there for probably 60 seconds, maybe a little less,
Mm-hmm.
and then like someone flipped the switch, it was off. And then there was this laser light that came immediately in its stead, and lasers were new in 1977. I had never seen one except on television. But this laser light would come and land in the campsite in an area and stay there for literally a tenth of a second and then reappear in a different spot. So it gave the illusion that this light was dancing all over our campsite.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall, I had this feeling, hey, this thing's checking us out. But I still had that feeling of calm. And that lasted for about 3 minutes. And then we were both hit with this feeling of, man, all I wanted to do was go to sleep.
Yeah.
I was just incredibly tired. I felt heavily sedated. My friend felt the same way. And he just, with this thing 3,000 feet over our heads, and I mean, it was massive. I mean, it was like a Walmart.
Oh, wow.
He dragged his air mattress, he threw it in the tent, and just fell on top of it. And I did the same. I didn't bother to take off my boots or my shirt or anything. I just fell on top of this mattress, and I was out. And I guess I had been out, we determined later, somewhere around 4.5 hours. After the fact, we discovered both of our watches had stopped at 2:40.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were mechanical wind-up watches.
Yeah.
And neither one would ever work again. I wish I'd saved mine.
Yeah, retrospect. The other souvenir.
Yeah.
The other souvenir, aside from the one that you're wearing.
Right. So.
Okay, so, well, the thing is, you're both out. What time did you woke up in the morning? Did you feel anything at that point, or?
Yeah, you know what? I'll make this quick. I woke up to these flashing bright lights coming through the canvas of the tent. And it was green and yellow and flashes of white light. And they were very intense. They were like a 1960s old school flash bulb that would go off and you'd see blue every time you blinked your eyes for an hour. Mm-hmm. That's how brilliantly bright this thing was. And it woke me up. I'm confused. I'm like, oh, yeah, I must be at camping. That's where I'm at. That's right. And I'm thinking these are like somehow the overhead lights of a park ranger's truck there to kick us out or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I noticed my boots were undone. And I thought, that's not right. And in the military, they teach you how to take care of your feet. So I took my boots off and discovered my socks were on sideways. Now, that would never have happened to me.
Yeah.
That would never have happened to me. So that confused me, and I put them on correctly, laced up my boots. And in one of the flashes of the light, I could see that my friend had been crying. He was on his knees. He was peeking out the flap of the left side of the tent, and he's got tears running down his cheeks. And I'm like, Toby, man, what is it? Is it park rangers? And he doesn't answer me. Matter of fact, he goes, sure, and asks me. Tells me to be quiet, whispers, be quiet. And so I want to know what's going on. I get to my knees, and I look outside the tent from my side, and I could see that this thing that had been 3,000 feet over our heads had descended, and now was about 30 feet over our heads. And it was just absolutely enormous.
Wow.
And the other thing that I noticed was that there were these kids. Well, what I thought were kids, about maybe a dozen or 15, and they were paired up in twos and threes, and they were just kind of walking around this meadow. And they all walked with the same distinctive gait. They had a very odd walk, like they had sore feet or something. They didn't walk with a normal human gait.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked, I'm still a bit out of it. And I said, hey, Toby, man, what are these kids doing out here? In the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. And I was still under that sedation or whatever it was.
Right.
And he says, man, those ain't no little kids, Terry. Take a look at them. They're not human beings. They took us. Don't you remember? They took us and they hurt us. Mm. And as soon as he said that, fear just rushed right back, and I was absolutely terrified. And I looked again out the camp, out the flap of the tent, and he was right. These were not human beings. They had the large heads. They were typical, like the gray aliens.
Mm-hmm.
So, 3.5 feet tall, and wandering around the meadow, and I was shocked, and I was absolutely terrified. And we watched these things, and what happened was there was, from underneath of this craft, there came a light, and it was another column of visible white light. It was about 25 feet in diameter, perfectly circular, and it came down from this craft, formed this column of white light, and these little guys would wander into this light, and they would dissolve. And they did that in twos and threes until the last two walked in and they dissolved. And as soon as they were gone, that light shut off.
Mm-hmm.
And then we watched this thing take off. And it didn't take off like a rocket. It just lifted off like a hot air balloon. And it rose straight up in the air. And the lights at the apex, at the points of each triangle, there were these multicolored lights running up and down what I call a light bar. Those all shifted from multicolored to just white. And I remember thinking, I bet that's what makes it look like a twinkling star when it's in the sky. And I don't know where that thought came from, but that was my thought. Mm-hmm. And we watched this thing till it was 3 dots of light, and then 1 dot of light, and then gone. And still no noises in the forest, still dead silent. And,
the bugs were smart.
Bugs were smart. Yeah.
It's like, I'm invisible.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were, this sounds crazy, but I didn't want to leave the tent. I mean, the tent was just a piece of canvas over my head.
Yeah.
But I felt like it gave me cover.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to be in the open to run from the tent to the car. And it took us 30 minutes to get the courage up to make a dash to the car and drive back home. And we finally did. And to this day, I will not walk across an open space.
Incident at Devil's Den. Terry Lovelace was supposed to appear at the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference. That's been delayed, postponed. The other guests, Whitley Strieber, David Paulides, a lineup of really excellent speakers. The story, though, we haven't heard what happened to his friend and about his alien implant. Coming up next, Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House. Okay, we're skipping the part where they got in really big trouble for crossing the area that said, do not enter. Remember that part? Okay. They got in trouble, and the military backlash was a bit harsh. Okay, we're skipping that. It's in the book. But what comes next is what happened when he found out that he was carrying a little extra baggage in his leg.
This all blew over. Nothing came of it. And I got to finish my enlistment. I got out of the Air Force and went to finish undergrad and go to law school. I started running in 1979. Because when I got out of the military, I noticed that I was studying, I was sedentary, I was gaining weight. I started running, and I liked it. I liked the endorphins, I liked the dopamine. I noticed that every time I would run, I never ran marathons. I'd run 3 or 4 miles a day, but I ran every day. At the 2-mile mark in my run, without fail, there was a spot on my right knee and lateral that would go absolutely numb. And it was about the size of a $50. And I could take a pen and delineate the edges of it. It was perfectly circular. Mm. And that numbness would last for about 30 minutes after my run and wear off. And I asked my doctor, I said, I get this numb spot that appears on my leg when I hit the 2-mile mark in my run. And she told me, she says, it sounds like a systemic reaction. Probably nothing. I wouldn't worry about it. So I didn't. Until 2012. 2012, when I had a cyst under my knee, and I went to the hospital to get an X-ray, and I get all my medical care from the VA. Mm-hmm. When they took the images of my leg, the tech was like, "Did you suffer a shrapnel wound or something? It's like you got debris in your leg. You got some kind of metal in your leg." And I'm like, "No, I've never left Missouri." Mm-hmm. She called a radiologist down to look at it. The radiologist insisted, he said, well, you had to have an accident and there'll be a scar on your knee because you can't violate the integrity of the skin and put a piece of metal this deep in your leg and there not be a scar left. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they fade and move and they're hard to see, but they're always there. And he rolls up my leg and he looks at my leg for 10 minutes and he's just absolutely dumbfounded. Mm-hmm. And he says, you don't have a scar? I said, yeah, I told you. And I said, doctor, how often is it that you find a foreign body under the tissue like this and there not be a corresponding scar? And he said, never. Mm-hmm. I've been a radiologist 23 years. I've never seen this before. And he showed me that X-ray. And when he showed me that X-ray and I saw that thing about the size of a fingernail with the 2 wires attached, mm-hmm. As soon as I saw that, I realized that lay right underneath where that numb spot was. And I knew then, as soon as I saw that, I knew that back in 1977, those things had put their hands on me. And that just changed everything. I decided I'm going to, fortunately I retired early, so I determined I'm going to tell the world about this. So I'm going to tell my story. And, fortunately, because I didn't know if they were going to charge me with crime or not, I had the presence of mind to take notes.
Yes.
And I built notebooks full of notes about what happened. And so I had those to refer to when I wrote the book. Not that I really needed them all that much, because
but it helps. It helps.
It helped. It helped with details.
Well,
it's a big event.
For that, it also corroborates. So, okay.
Right.
Now, so for anyone who's listening, the deal is you were a state's attorney, and that's a kind of a job with a whole lot of credibility and leverage on some playing fields. And if you had come forward with, by the way, I have an alien implant, and I was abducted by aliens back in 1977, that kind of would have made that history, don't you think?
Oh, I'd have been fired. I'd absolutely. I was Attorney General for 2 jurisdictions. I was Attorney General in the United States Territory of American Samoa, and then State's Attorney for the state of Vermont. And in either jurisdiction, and I practiced law where I went to law school in Michigan. I had a law office in Lansing. Mm-hmm. Any place. There are some professions where you just don't talk about those kind of things. I mean, I would have lost all my standing with my peers in the legal community. I'd have been fired from my job, and I'd have been a joke.
Okay.
But you know what? I think that's kind of changing. I do. I think that attitude is changing. I don't know if you've ever talked to Travis Parker or Travis Walton or Calvin Parker or Chris Bledsoe or any of them.
I haven't spoken to them. I've read their stuff, and that's why I'm interested in this, and I've had my own experiences. And so this is why, for me, getting the word out and beginning to get some kind of a frame of reference for the unique aspect that it isn't the same. It isn't for everyone a cookie cutter. They're all grays. They're all white Nordics. This is a completely different, I think, aspect of our awareness that is beyond anything at this point that we're able to identify or put one neat and tidy label on. It is unknown, unexplained, and the only way we get information is by listening to people like you who've had these kinds of intense contacts that you can remember and that you did have a corroborating witness. Let's talk about your friend, because what happened?
Here's what happened to my friend. When we left that campsite to drive back, something had changed between us. I mean, our relationship was different. This guy was my best friend in the world, would have, done anything for the guy. When we got back to the base, we were ordered to have no contact with one another. Very harshly, we were ordered. I was told you're to have no contact with Sergeant Tobias. You're not to send him any notes, communicate with him through any third parties. You're not to give him anything. He's not to give you anything. So they wanted us not to get together.
Yeah.
And share our story.
Mm-hmm.
But he kind of fell apart. I processed this. It was difficult for me to process too. But I was fortunate enough. I had a good support system. My wife, of 46 years now, was there with me, and I had a support system, and I came through it. And Toby, I guess, didn't have that. Or I think that, like I said, they gave him a double measure. I violated that order. They gave him orders to Japan at light speed, and they separated us. Mm-hmm. And I stopped by his house because I told my wife, I want to say goodbye to the guy, Yeah. And I really didn't want anything to do with him, to be honest with you, but I wanted to say goodbye to him. So she stopped the car in front of his house, and I ran up to the door, same door I'd walked through 100 times before, and I just walked in, and his wife was just glaring at me. I found out years later that my friend told his wife, "Oh, this is all Terry's idea."
Oh, okay,
so that's why I got the dirty look.
Yes.
So, but she heard this exchange, or pardon me, Toby was in the bedroom and heard this exchange. So he came out of the bedroom, and he was I was shocked. He was a few inches shorter than me. He was always very particular about his appearance, and he was disheveled. He had on a dirty T-shirt, dirty jeans, no shoes. His eyes were bloodshot, and when he got close to me, he had vodka on his breath or some kind of hard liquor.
Yeah.
And he wasn't a drinker. Neither one of us were. And I felt like I should embrace the guy. I thought that would be appropriate, and I didn't. But we arranged this awkward handshake. And he looked up at me, and he said, "It happened, didn't it, Jerry?
Oh, gosh.
It all happened."
Oh, wow.
And I said, and that was a very emotional moment for me. I said, "Yes, my brother, it all happened." And he said, why? And I said, I don't know, Toby. I don't know. And I looked down at my shoes and turned around. I left the house, and that's the last I ever saw of him. So that was the end of my friend Toby. He years later, I tried to track him down because I had his dad's name and phone number in Flint. So I called his dad, and I said, yeah, I'm Terry Lovelace. I'm trying to reconnect with your son. And he says, oh, yeah, I know who you are. And he says, I said, how's Toby doing? He says, he's not doing well. We found out he went to Japan. He got out of the service in less than honorable circumstances and was divorced and was basically living on the streets.
Yeah.
And,
Okay, we need to take a break here. We're going to come back and find out a little bit more about what happened to Toby. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, Incident at Devil's Den with Terry Lovelace. So the story isn't over with Toby.
there was an very odd thing that happened, and that was that a few years later, when I was practicing law, I was working with a FBI agent, and we became friends. And I said, "Hey, man, you think you could help me find the guy I was with in the Air Force?" He says, "Oh, sure." He says, "If the guy's not a fugitive, I can find anybody." And I gave him everything that I had on Toby.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Here's the guy. See what you can find for me." He said, "Sure, no worries." He said, "But, it's not an official investigation. It's just between us." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I understand. So, a couple weeks later, he says, "Hey, meet me at this bar we go to every so often on Friday night." And I met him there. And he's real serious. And he says, "I've got bad news for you. Your friend's dead." And I'm like, "My friend's dead? What do you mean he's dead?" He said, "Yeah, it was an auto accident in Flint. I'm very sorry." And I thought, But, I thought, well, things like that happen. So I went to write this book in 2016. I started in earnest writing it. And I thought, you know what, I want to look up Toby's obit and maybe fly up to Michigan and visit his gravesite. So I got on and did some investigating on the internet. And I found that he was alive until September 4th, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI agent lied to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, I knew FBI agents to be a cut above. I mean, they were truthful,
Right.
I mean, people
Right.
you could trust your life with. And all I can think of is that, somehow maybe my file was tagged or something.
Yeah, red flag somewhere. Red
And
flag.
they didn't want us to get together after the fact.
It's I think, a very unique group of accomplished people who have some kind of ability that seem to attract interest from the others. Are we, an experiment? Are we lab rats from your perspective? How, at this point, how do you reconcile this?
I scratch my head. I'm like, look, I'm nothing special. I'm just not that interesting, right?
Possibly.
And Lou Elizondo. No, I think that's very accurate. Lou Elizondo from the show Unidentified.
Yeah.
Lou was the one that broke that story about the Tic Tacs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also friends with Kevin Day, who was the radar operator aboard the Princeton. He's famous for the phrase, "It's raining UFOs." But anyway, Lou Elizondo. And again, cliche time, I had these unmarked helicopters flying over my house.
Yes.
About 4 months after I put my book out.
Yes.
And I was looking for the IN number, the identifier number on these helicopters. And when I blow them up, occasionally I found UFOs in the background, flying disc and the like. And I can send you some photos.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so who's monitoring who? Are they monitoring the helicopters monitoring you?
Great question.
Or is it a screen?
Great question.
Is it a screen?
They're circling my house. I don't know who is chasing who.
Yeah.
I have a feeling, my gut tells me, because of the UFOs can so much outperform a helicopter, that the helicopters are chasing them. But these guys would come between 9 and 10 in the morning, and they did for about 8 months. And I documented it. I went out, I took their pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I made a record of it. I got a friend who's a history professor, but when he was younger in the Army, he was a helicopter pilot. And he knows everything about helicopters, right? So I sent him a digital copy of all these helicopters. And he said, well, first of all, you can see the guys in some of the shots, you could see guys inside.
Mm-hmm.
They were wearing white helmets. And he says, these are military. They don't, because military pilots have to wear helmets. Civilian pilots disdain helmets. They don't like them. They think it interferes with their vision. But military pilots must wear them. And he said, these helicopters that you photograph have an anomalous light source, some kind of like weird thing on the tail. He says that I've never seen before. So I told Lou Elizondo this, and I sent him all these pictures, and he came to my house for 2 days. So, he wasn't disappointed. We went out to eat, and a couple blocks from my house, and here comes this military helicopter, about 200 feet off the ground, zooming right over the top of us.
Wow.
And that lasted for about 9 months. And at first it was kind of cool. At first it was kind of fun, And then
cool in a special way.
In a special way. Yeah. But then you know what? It got intimidating. It wore us down. I mean, we sold our home. I intended to stay there, forever. I sold my home and we moved.
Mm-hmm.
The first night in our new home, we moved maybe 8 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday morning, I'll never forget, Sunday morning, 9 a.m., I hear the familiar thump, 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 thump. And my wife and I both woke up. She says, oh, no. And I ran outside, and there's a large olive drab helicopter 400 feet above our new house. And I raised up my phone to take a photograph, and it peels off to the left and takes off. And it was just their way of saying, we know where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And I've not seen a helicopter since then.
We've got to wrap up here, but my thing is that from other people I've talked to, that these other entities have a way of being able to create a vision of something that maybe we aren't seeing what we think.
In my book, I talk about when I was a little kid, I saw these little monkeys in my room, and it happened a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it wigged out my parents, and because occasionally I would scream. And, I put my email address in the back of my book. And I said, if you've had an experience and you want to share it, write to me. And I promise I'll write you back. Well, I didn't know it, but to date, I have over 1,280 responses from people. I've got people that tell me, oh, yeah, when I was 8 years old, I used to see monkeys or rabbits or deer or owls, lots of owls, or orbs. And I think these things can take on a benign appearance to not scare a child.
Yes.
I think that, a lot of people have had that. A lot of people write me and they say, I remember this dream from when I was 4. I'm like, what are the odds you're going to remember a dream from 4? I mean, can you remember all the Christmases, the birthdays, all that stuff you had? But you can remember this one dream?
If it's an odd dream like that, you betcha it won't go away.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense. And there's something about it that sticks with you, like what you have experienced at Devil's Den.
Absolutely. If you're locked down and you've got some time, give it a read.
Use it productively. And the other thing too, they can contact you too, because these stories I think you should put out as well. I think this is stuff worth sharing, because it says we share these common unknowns, and the more we share the stories, the more we make them real and less of an outcast moment, because that's what's still being done.
I'm putting it together in a book. Oh, and some of them would just blow your mind. I don't have time to go into them. But, there's a sort of commonality that runs through the core of the ones that feel really, really real. And they always start off with this disclaimer like, now, you're not going to believe this, so please don't think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And then they tell me some amazing stories.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate it very much. Anything happens, I'll give you a call.
Thank you. Again, the book is Incident at Devil's Den, available on Amazon, or you can check out Terry's website, terrylovelace.com. Check out the pictures. You can just Google and find those pictures with the implant in his leg. It's pretty interesting. And the other thing, too, is that there's so many of these incidents that people talk about. This is a little bit more frightening, and it seems unreal, but we're living through times right now that a whole lot of this seems unreal, and it's all real. So whatever you do, remember, anything's possible. Till next time, stay curious.
When things feel a bit chaotic, Instacart helps deliver milk and sausage. Add a little life to your cart. Get stuff from literally all your stores, from baby wipes to albacore. Add a little life to your cart. Instacart helps get your groceries. Your first 3 deliveries are free.
Download Instacart. Add life to cart. Terms apply.
Instacart shoppers know groceries. They know that you can't make guacamole with rock-hard avocados. They know how to quickly find those peanut butter pretzels you can never find. And they keep you in the know by giving you updates about your order along the way. Let Instacart shoppers help take shopping off your plate so you can get time and energy back for what really matters. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Instacart. Add life to cart.